Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. So in this video we'll be continuing where we left off with the Mini Cooper, and that is the turbo boost issue. So we still have a problem with the Mini Cooper. In the first part, I'm calling these parts now because it is getting to the point now where we have actual individual parts. In the first part we cleaned the intake valves, we actually removed the intake and looked at the valves, and the valves are absolutely fully full of carbon. So these were removed, cleaned and replaced with new seals. We also replaced the breather pipe from the turbo, and still we had the same issue. We then moved on to the second part, which was the DPF. Now, I was pretty confident this was the issue, even though my diagnostics tool kind of indicated it wasn't. It had back pressure, and I figured this could be the issue, this or the cat. We put this in, we put 2 tins of this in, and absolutely no change. Symptoms are identical. So let's move on to part 3. For those of you who have not seen part 1 or part 2, quite simply, the car, it seems to drive fairly well, it's just slow, to break it down. Basically, the car will not rev past 4,000 RPM. No matter what you do, you can bring the car up to 70 miles an hour, shift it a second, and it'll drop straight down to 4,000 RPM. So something in this car is telling the car to limit itself to 4,000 RPM. So how I realised it was a time delay to actually the turbo itself is I was believing the turbo was a fault. However, if I was to say get in second gear and put my foot down, and it would almost redline, after about 10-15 seconds it would just automatically drop down to 4,000 RPM. I don't actually think I mentioned, but in the first part we did actually take off the turbo actuator, had that professionally rebuilt. The guy said it was perfectly fine, sent it back, no problems, that is back on the car now. It could still be a problem with the turbo. It could possibly still be the DPF. Maybe this hasn't did the job. We might have to pull the full DPF off and give it a proper clean, manual clean. So that could also be an issue. There could be many things that could be a fault. However, one thing you may have noticed in front here is a fuel filter. So this is the fuel filter I've taken off. Now, I've already replaced this, and unfortunately it did not fix the issue. As you can see, the date on it is April 2017. So the filter isn't that old, but it was pretty dirty. Basically, when you take this off, all the debris gets trapped inside. Obviously clean fuel comes out this end, or the dirty fuel goes in this end. So when I quite simply poured this into a tub, as you can imagine, it was pretty grim. It was some dirty, disgusting fuel. Definitely didn't want that going into the engine. So replace the fuel filter. My logic was, when the car is off and you put the ignition on, the fuel pump primes the filter, obviously, and it basically primes the whole fuel line. So I was thinking maybe once this is primed, the fuel rail is getting plenty of fuel, and when the engine starts, that fuel pressure drops slightly because this is gummed up and it just can't supply the right amount of fuel to keep the engine running as it should do. So that's why it limits down the. It was a long shot. I did check with my diagnostic machine the fuel pressure, and it did actually seem fairly decent. So I didn't think this was going to do much. But when I took it off and realised all the crap coming out, it needed replacing regardless. So once again, with this car, everything I've done so far, it's cost money obviously, but it's stuff that would have been replaced regardless. So once again, this is a serviceable part, and I've changed this, and it's still an issue. I think I'm at a point now where I am unfortunately going to have to start spending money replacing parts that I possibly aren't faulty at all. I believe the next logical step to take would probably be the EGR valve. This is a part that is quite easily removed. It's not too expensive, and basically it is common for the actual piston to get stuck. I believe that when the engines are idle and driving around the town, say, I think the valve is meant to be open slightly to allow for these gases to flow around. When you get up to motorway speeds, when you put your foot down, I think the valve is meant to close. Once that valve closes, you get full power. My logic is that maybe this is sticking open and it is not fully closing, and in that case it's recirculating the gases when it should be giving full output to the engine. So the next step is to get the EGR off, so let's get that done now. So this is the EGR valve. It wasn't that difficult to get off. It was pretty straightforward. You have basically two coolant lines and a couple of bolts at either end, and that is it. Oh, obviously the electrical plug. Now I've actually taken these bolts out. Wasn't easy. These have some sort of weird 5-pointed Torx bolt in there, which is a bit of a pain to get off. So I just used a pair of vice grips and basically worked my way around and got them all off eventually. Wasn't pleasant, but did find some interest inside, and that is, so I guess this is, well, this is your motor obviously, and this cog here attaches to the motor, and that rides on this cog here. It's not a lot, but can you see this one here? I'm just going to pick it up on camera. It's actually worn down. It's, I would say, about half missing, and you're probably not going to see this either, but there's some shiny surfaces here, which is where it's making contact and wearing through. Now there's about 3 or 4 there which are badly worn, but the thing is, it's not even. I would expect to see the markings. Clearly you can't see, can you? Can you see them shiny tips there? I would expect to see that on all of them, but I can only see them on them couple, and the one after them 3 there is actually broken off. So that could be a possible issue that we're having. I should mention, when you work this down by hand, it does feel fine. It's probably not going to pick it up on camera, but when you let it go, when it gets to the end, it sounds like it's skipping that tooth, and it doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound what I would expect it to sound like. If you let it just go halfway, such as here, see, it's nice and quiet. But when you get further down, it kind of, I don't know if you guys can pick it up on camera, but it most definitely doesn't sound correct. So let's test the motor. I'm assuming the motor will be perfectly fine, because I'd imagine the motor would definitely throw up an error code. So I got myself a 12-volt battery. I did check these with a multimeter, and it looks like the 2 at the end here are the power inputs. It isn't actually grounded to the actual pump itself, the motor itself. It's actually all contained within this resin. That one is probably ground. I'm going to go with number 2 as being the actual power. So that seems like it's okay. Doesn't sound too clever. Does sound a little rough. Okay, so I go back together just for testing purposes. So this is the power in, so something obviously controls when it gets power and when it doesn't, and also the amount of voltage. I think 12 volts is probably too much. I imagine this is probably like 5 volts or probably 9, something like that, and I guess the voltage would change, so maybe 1 or 2 volts might pull this out so far and 5 volts might bring it right in. I'm not too sure exactly, but we've got 12 volts to work with, so if this is working, this should pull it back in. I've been playing about this for a bit now, and what I've noticed is if I put the black on there, so ground to 5, 4 to red, we do get a 0.846 in resistance. So there is some signals coming out of here, so maybe, but I'm not getting anything from 4 and 3. So is that possibly the issue? Is that what the problem is here? It's getting quite warm. Take that off before I burn the motor out. I'm getting resistance from 3 and 4 once there's power applied. Is that normal? Should there be? Honestly, I don't know, guys, to be truthful, but due to the fact that some of these parts in here are obviously worn, one is actually worn down, I am going to get a new part. And one EGR valve, so let's give this a test and see what happens. So let's put a ground on it. Same as before in pin 1. That sounds much better. That sounds nice and smooth. Yeah, before that sounded really rough. Also, there's no play. As you can see, this one's pretty solid. On this one, it actually rotates. You can see inside here, it's actually moving, the whole thing. On this one, solid. So maybe something inside here's actually failed. Possible. Time has come to put this back on the car. So quite simply, make sure your gasket's on the bottom and place it back onto the EGR cooler. Kind of goes like this, I believe. You got 2 bolts at the bottom and your electrical plug at the top, and you have 2 coolant lines that go into here. Make sure that you put some hose clamps on so they don't come back off, which I'll be doing with these. And that is quite simply it. The rest of it is just putting everything back that you took off. Quite simple to do. So let's get this put back in and let's give the engine a start and let's see what happens. Everything's back together, so let's give this engine a start and hopefully everything should be okay. Seems okay. So I should add, you will need to top up your coolant. Mine was just below the min. It took a tiny little bit of coolant, maybe a quarter a cup if that. So just after you put the EGR valve on, top it back up to max and go and check for leaks, which is what I'll go and do now. No leaks, so let's take this car out and let's hope this is all fixed. I have a funny feeling it's not going to be, but let's be positive and let's hope this is working now. Okay, so it's been a few days and unfortunately the car has not got any better. It's identical, nothing has changed. So this is what I've used in the past. This is a cheap one. I've also used this diagnostic tool, and this has been really good in the past. I've cleared ABS lights, I've cleared airbag lights. I've never had a problem, it's always worked. But I'm not convinced. This Mini is this Mini has a problem, essentially. How this isn't picking anything up. So I did a bit of research and I found out this guy here, the 7910 diagnostic tool, this guy here is solely made for the BMW, the Mini Coopers, well Minis, and the Rolls Royces. So I've already plugged this in and I found 12 error codes. Oddly enough, pretty much every error code I found was stuff I've replaced in this car in the past, apart from one, which was a mass airflow sensor. Now I've cleaned that, I've checked the ratings on this and the readings seem fine, but this is seen as a ground issue. But I've brought the car out, it's warmed up, I'm parked up, so I'm basically going to put this machine on, read the codes, clear everything, and then give it a try from there. So let's see if I can remember what I did. I think I went to BMW, okay, it was Mini F55, and I'm pretty sure I went on basic. I don't think I went on special. System scan, there, 12 error codes. Now there's no engine light on, but these codes, I'm guessing each piece of hardware in this car must have its own, I guess, kind of ECU, its memory. And I'm wondering if, even though I've replaced or cleaned the parts, I wonder if it's still thinking of there. So Swirl Flap Actuator position, it's too high. Now it was gummed up and I don't think it was closing properly, so that's probably that code there. Now I don't know if this is a new condition or an old. It says current new, but this can't be, I've cleaned it all out, but I think it still thinks it's a fault. We have the Swirl Flap Actuator, that's faulty, apparently the lever's broken. We have fault June adaptation. Fuel pre-supply is low. Now I've changed the fuel filter, so that probably fixed that issue. Rail pressure, it's probably related to the fuel filter. Hot airflow mass meter, now that is the only one I haven't actually touched, but hopefully that will go away. I've had the intake pipes and stuff off in the past, so maybe that's the reason why it's reading that. Intake air temperature sensor. See, similarly, I've removed parts and started the engine and test things out, so it could just be an old code. EGR valve position control, valve closed too loosely. Now if you remember, on the old EGR it was quite loose. The new one is obviously brand new, so hopefully clearing that code will fix that issue. EGR again. That's interesting actually. Open circuit. That could be when I actually removed it to test it. Charge air temperature signal. That also could be when I removed the intake piping off the turbo. Airflow mass system measured. Well, that's probably because the pipe was removed also. So these are all kind of related to what I've been testing. Now, these don't have anything in brackets at the end other than current new condition, which is a swirl flap actuator. If that is faulty, that would explain the issue. But I've cleaned it, reassembled it, and it seemed to work okay, but obviously I can't visually see this working when I'm driving, but from looking at it on the bench, it seemed okay. So I think the next thing to do is a race, which I guess, please wait 10 seconds, turn ignition off and turn back on. So a few more seconds. Back to the main menu, ignition on. I won't start the engine. For BMW Mini F55 basic system scan. Oh, it's found one issue. I wonder if that is going to be the swirl flap actuator. It is possible that it was gummed up, that with it being gummed up, it could have actually damaged the gearing inside the actuator itself. Yeah, it's found one. Refault codes. Yeah, that's, so that is probably what is causing my issue. Right. This is under pressure. Now that shouldn't be. Should we try and delete that? Because I've had this AC recharged. So we have instrument cluster. Oh yeah, so the AC one's gone, that's good. So you must have to delete each one individually. 4,300, 4,400 RPM. Okay, so I've been out on a ride. I basically set the car off doing a DPF regen. I figured since I'm out testing the car, I may as well run it. It is actually activated and I think it's about finished. I've did about a 30-minute drive, and the suit content has went down from 17 to about 4, but it still says it's active, so I'm guessing that's going to keep going to probably say 0. So I'll do an update on that later on. However, we still have 3 fault codes now, all related to the actuator on the swirl flaps, which is the intake manifold. Now it says that adaptation has failed, the lever is broken, and it is not angled correctly. I've managed to find a setting within this, and it does actually tell you that the swirl flap actuator position is minus 10.68, desired position 0, well basically 0.01, which is 0. So it's kind of 11 degrees or 11% out. So I'm assuming that the actual cog or something inside the actuator has jumped or moved. Yeah, so I've started the engine out of curiosity and I wanted to see what these values change to. As you can see, I cannot go past 4,000 RPM, and that did not change. So the desired position is 31, 32, 33. When I rev, it changes. So that is clearly not working, because as you can see, the actual position is minus 10. So I thought it might be slightly out. From this, it's not moving whatsoever. So I think it is actually the actuator that is their fault. Okay guys, so we're back. The manifold is off the car and we have the replacement manifold. Now, I did opt for a second-hand manifold. This is from a very low mileage car. It's in excellent condition, fully working, pretty much complete. This is now junk. So what do we have? So these came with the new manifold. Now these are low mileage, however in the previous video we picked up some brand new ones. So these are my brand new gaskets, so they've been installed. We have our sensor installed. I've put the gasket on. It did actually come with the attachment from the EGR cooler, and it's in very good condition, but the one that I took off the original car is nice and clean from where I cleaned it, so I've reused that. So we're reusing the EGR cooler bracket, the probe, and the gaskets. These are your swirl flaps. You have three with a bin free cylinder, and this is the actuator. I've had the actuator off, I've had it in bits. It all seems mechanically fine inside. It sounds pretty fine. I mean, nothing alarming about it. It sounds just like this one does. I've had this one off, compared them, perfectly fine. So this leads me to believe that the actuator itself, even though it was stating there was a fault with the actuator, I do honestly believe this is perfectly fine. It was detecting an issue with this. Now this is the arm. This goes from this side up into this side. And basically when this actuator moves like that, this pulls the arm, which in turn pulls this lever here at the side and basically open and closes the swirl flaps. I think what was happening is that it was fine on idle and on revving, it was okay. As soon as you accelerate and you boost, it was opening and boosting, then closing, shifting for second gear, opening and then closing, and then just stopping. And this would explain the restricted performance. You got to think half of these are closed off. The only, pretty much, apart from the slight gap around the edge, the only airflow that you get into the engine is through these three openings here. So I think this was the issue, and the arm. I don't want to take this back to bits because I don't want to break it, but if you can work it out on here, it attaches to the actuator at the top here, but the bottom attaches to this, the swirl flaps. Now if I try to pull this off, it's very tight. Now I thought it's because it's assembled. I took the actuator off, the arm was fully loose and I couldn't get this off. It's almost, I'm sure it just come off, and if I put a screwdriver in there and pry it off, it probably will come off, but I don't want to break it. I think there's something in there that's stopping that from coming off. That is very, very solid. On this one, it is most definitely not. So to compare it, I've put the arm on here, like so, and as you can see, there's too much play. There's absolutely nothing there at all. No matter how hard you push this in, there's just nothing's clipping in place. So I think there should be something on the inside, possibly, that clips over this here. Not too sure exactly how the thing goes together, but basically it is not basically clipping together. If you imagine this is your swirl flaps, this should be solid. This should be in place as such, and it should only move up and down. If you hold the swirl flap in place completely loose, the only thing I can think is that is worn down, or the inside is worn down, or there should be something in there that holds it in place, but it's missing. But whatever it is, that will explain the lever arm fault that my machine was detecting. That is completely shot. So I'm so glad that I didn't go plan A, which was just to buy an actuator, because I do actually believe this actuator is perfectly fine. The actuators I found on eBay were about £50 second hand, and they did not come with the arm. So a new actuator I don't think would fix my issue. When you put it onto the actuator itself, it's pretty decent, but it has got play once again. It does clip, and there's a bit of resistance to get it on and off, but like I say, it does rock from side to side. This other one, I mean, replacement does not. So the swirl flaps, now this is upside down. On the car, this would be like this, kind of pretty much like that on the car itself. This is your actuator, these are your swirl flaps. The rod is connected here. Now on mine, there was no play here, but there was some play at the end. Wasn't much play, I just assumed that would be fine. These do move around, or at least mine do, these ones don't. As you can see on the original one, the swirl flaps themselves, they do slide about back and forwards, so I figured that bit of movement would help free up any gaps that's around the edge, so I just assumed that was fine. Now, one thing you will notice is I can literally move that up and down, and from the side, I don't know if you work it out, but it's an egg shape, very slight. It's not an obvious egg shape, but it's definitely not circle. It's definitely not a circle, so I believe this has been moving around and rubbing, and it's actually egged out the hole. This one here is perfectly round. Now, you wobble this one, we do get a bit of play, which you can see at the end there, it's moving slightly, but that is it. This one here, I can literally move the whole entire shaft. So I believe that, with that being loose, remember I was getting like a -12, -11? I think it's because it's so loose, when these are shut, like that, they're shut. And if I try to push back on this, they won't go back any further. That is shut and just solid. On mine, once they're shut like this, and you apply pressure, can you see? The actuator only shuts them to here, but if you apply pressure, see how they go back a little bit? It's not much. They're basically rocking on the shaft. Not only is the plastic here egg shaped and not round anymore, so it's worn through the plastic itself, the housing, these individual flaps themselves are loose, so they're actually moving independently of the actual shaft. So that is another issue. We have a worn shaft, worn swirl flaps, definitely a damaged arm. So them three combined is just been giving me a complete headache. So guys, I do believe this is the entire issue that we've been having. The next step is to get this guy back on the Mini Cooper. Okay guys, so we're back in the car again. Deja vu, we have error codes. Swirl Flap Actuator. These could be old code. I hope they're old codes. Okay, so we'll erase them codes. Turn the engine off. Back on. Let's come out of this. System scan. We found a fault code. What's the fault code? When you're ready. Oh. So the DPF is not functioning correctly. Okay, that's new. I've just did a DPF regen and it was perfectly fine. And now we have the drivetrain error. Oh, great. Particular filter pressure sensor low. Now, I'm pretty sure I disconnected that when I put the manifold back on, because it's right at the back of the engine and you have to pull the wiring loom over the manifold. And I do vaguely remember unclipping some at the very back. I don't think I plugged it back in, so let's go and check that out. Yes, it was. So yeah, I did not plug it in, so it wouldn't be a car repair if you didn't forget to plug something in. Let's take it for a test drive and then rescan for codes. Hopefully we'll be all good. Okay, so time for a status update. So far, so good. In case you're wondering why I got this screen up for, I think I might have just got a flat tyre. It was 2.4, but a few minutes ago I ran over something and I heard a loud thud. So I think I've either drove over something like a rock, or I've drove over a nail or a bolt or something, but I think the tyre pressure's gone down. So this car is a car that just keeps on giving. Made it back home and we're back at 2.4, 2.1's at the rear. So yeah, not quite sure what that was all about. Any error messages? Check control, 0. Oh yeah guys, the reason why I didn't film the installation of the manifold is, as you can see outside, is absolutely lashing down. It's actually calmed down now, but when I was doing the job itself, I got absolutely soaking wet. So yeah, unfortunately I couldn't put the camera out. I just wanted to rush it and get it done, get it in there and have a test drive. It's getting on quite late now. Okay, so I've did a rescan and we are okay on all of them. Yeah, all okay. So it's been a few days. I've put about 100 or so miles on the car and it has been absolutely perfect, not missed a beat. So yeah, turns out it was the intake manifold. After all that hard work, we finally got there in the end and resolved it by replacing the faulty part. And I think we can call this one done. So hopefully you've enjoyed this, guys. Hopefully this will help some of you guys out in the future. Maybe someone out there is having a very similar issue what I've been having, and this hopefully could help you fix that. So yeah, hope you've liked the videos, and like always guys, please like and comment down below, subscribe for more videos, and I will see you in the next one.